sorry for the delay, folks. We're waiting for one more of our speakers who got delayed on the train. We'll start in the next few minutes, even if she's not here. Alright friends, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm pretty sure the streaming has already started, so if those of you are online, thanks for being with us. We have, as you can tell, two of our originally planned 4 speakers. I told you that one of them, her daughter just went into labor with her grandchild, so she had to go do that. And then the other one that had an unexpected train connection. Hopefully she will be here soon joining us. But for now, we have Jerry Drino, the Reverend Jerry Drino, and Dr. Sherwin Mendoza, and I'll tell you a little bit about each of them. Jerry Drino is the longest serving priest in the Diocese of El Camino Real. He said this morning he's been here for 57 years, and he's a member of the Diocesan Truth-Telling Task Force, the canon theologian for the Episcopal Church in Navajo Land, the former director of Intercultural Ministry Development for Province 8 of the Episcopal Church, which covers the western United States, Hawaii, Alaska, and Taiwan, and 96 different language groups, including 18 indigenous tribes. And he's rector emeritus of St. Philip's in San Jose, which has a mixed community of indigenous Guatemalan, Lao, Filipino, and Afro-European American congregation. And Sherwin Mendoza is part-time faculty member at De Anza College, where he teaches English and Asian American Studies since 2008. He was born into a settler family that migrated from the Christian northern Philippines into the southern island of Mindanao. Is that how you say it? Which through the course of the 20th and 21st centuries has been the scene of massive violence and displacement inflicted on both Muslims and indigenous tribes by U.S. colonial state and the neo-colonial Philippine state. And then Ruth Orta, who will hopefully be joining us in just a few minutes, is an indigenous native Californian of 5 generations and very proud of it. She learned about her heritage from who she calls the best mom in the world, who was born June 16th, 1902 on the Pleasanton Rancheria. Her mother's name was Trina Ruano, and her grandmother's name was Avelina Cornates. Lisjan is a name that referred to the area from San Lorenzo. They were both members of the Pleasanton Rancheria and born in 1863. Ruth is an elder in the indigenous organization, the Confederated Tribes of Lisjan, which is a name that referred to the area from San Lorenzo to San Jose, and is a Miwok word describing the people who called themselves Aquinas, which is an Ohlone name. And Ruth works with the Ohlone chairperson, Corina Guild. Kwairina Giri is the chairperson of the Tamian Nation, so confusing those two names. Okay, and the question that I posed for all of our speakers today is, why is it important to change the name of De Anza College? Hopefully some of you saw in front of you these packets that I passed out that said, "Who is Juan Bautista De Anza?" I know if Karina was here, she was planning on sharing a little bit about what the California History Center at De Anza has learned about that and what she's learned about it as chairwoman of the Tamian Nation and in her own research. I'll read a little bit about De Anza just to get us started, because I'm guessing most of you have no idea who he was. I didn't know who he was either until I started on this understanding journey. Juan Bautista De Anza is the man from whom De Anza College takes its name. He was a Spanish military officer and governor of the province of New Mexico. He is most well known for establishing a land route between what is now Arizona and Alta California, the Spanish name for the area north of the Baja Peninsula. He's also known for bringing Spanish settlers to the San Francisco Bay Area and scouting the site of what eventually became the city of San Francisco. The well-known account of Anza and his exploits, though obscures the disaster that he and other Spanish colonists brought upon indigenous peoples. Anza saw himself as a loyal servant of the Spanish Empire, and the De Anza Name Exploration Project feels that his vision of California under Spanish rule bears characteristics that people in the wider De Anza College community might find troubling. Some quotations from his journals. Some quotations from his journals are available in this packet, but I'll just read one very briefly. De Anza wrote, "These heathen," he called the native peoples of California heathen, "told me that when a large number of them were hunting the day before, they encountered a band of Apaches who were coming," he also would refer to them as Apaches, even though that's not the tribal name, "who were coming at once, bent on their accustomed robberies, but having the good fortune to surprise them, they were able to kill two and cause the rest to flee and retire to their own country." So he's, in that quote, is celebrating the killing of these indigenous people on the land very close to us, and there's lots of other troubling quotes in here where he kind of talks about them as if they're less than human, and uses language that suggests that he had very little respect for these people, wanted to enslave them, and in fact wanted to kill them. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jerry to talk a little bit about why changing the name of De Anza is important from the perspective of his work in the Episcopal Church. And I'll do slides.
Good. Thank you. It's good to be with you today. I think in terms of response to the question, we have to go to the term that is becoming more and more present in media. It has to do with fake news. It has to do with the inability to discern deeply what is the reality of a place. I think probably when De Anza College was named, it was an attempt by whites to at least assuage some of their guilt in terms of what had happened to the Mexican population here. And so as a way to get caught up in what was the romantic movement in California that starts in the 1880s, to absorb all things Mexican. And we have all kinds of Pueblo-style houses and Mexican rancheria-type houses, even our supermarkets and shopping malls oftentimes have architecture that reflects that. So it was an attempt by the original trustees to redeem a little bit of history. Now, the work of our diocesan task force is to go below the surface, and I want to lay out the work of the task force that may then give more substance to what this name change movement is about. So the second slide. So the mandate of the task force, which was formed 2 years ago, was to do an audit of the relationship that the Episcopal Church has had with the indigenous tribes. And interestingly enough, when we started to work with this, and Dr. David Howard Pitney is the chair of this group, but also an adjunct faculty at De Anza, we realize that there is no history. We as Episcopalians have had no history with official history with any of the indigenous tribes of our diocese. When you hear that, then you have to say, what is the history then? Because having no history, a whole lot was going on. And so we had to dig into and begin to construct the history of our diocesan area, and then to realize that Episcopalians were in the room. We were there. All of these events were going on, and yet none of the bishops, none of the parishes, none of the records of the Convention of the Diocese of California, which is our parent diocese, have any record of relationship with the indigenous people. So let's look at the scope of the indigenous people in California. This particular slide, which is not too clear, has the whole state of California, and you see all of the tribes. Before contact, the region of California was the most populous area in the nation, not only in terms of people, but in terms of the diversity of tribes. Over 250 tribes were identified as being within the boundaries of what is now the state of California. If we pull out just the region that makes up the Diocese of El Camino Real, we see the Chocheño or Muecma Ohlone, Ohlone meaning people in the language, the Ramaytush, the Tamian, the Owaswas, the Amamutsan, the Rumsen, Esalen, Selenian, Chalon, Interior or Northern Chumash, Obispeño, and Parismiano. Most people don't even conceive that all of those tribes were on their land. And so let's look at the audit. And next slide. So we were asked to audit what is the history, and so we had to create the history. And as I said before, there is no history, so what has gone on? Episcopalians being in the room, we can identify through parish records a few that were here in 1846 and possibly before, because the English had begun to immigrate into then Mexican California. But what happened in terms of their encounter with indigenous people goes back to what I said earlier, fake news and misinformation. The origin of this psychological condition started with Benjamin Franklin. In 1782, he created a fake newspaper called the Boston Independent Chronicle, basically to run stories to undermine the British public faith in their government. And he made up several articles, including a very important one, namely he depicted the Seneca tribe as being in relationship with the British Army, who then commissioned them to go and kill and scalp every member of the army, every man, woman, and child, and then to crate up all the scalps and send them back to England. He then sent copies of this newspaper to London. England was absolutely outraged, which means his psychological operation was successful. Then it came back to the United States and started a firestorm in all the newspapers in the land. Now, why is that important? Before the Yankees arrived here, they were already brainwashed as to who Native people were. They already were in a pseudo-trauma, in fear for their life of the Redskins. Starts with Benjamin Franklin, but for the next 150 years, newspaper article after newspaper article will depict the Native people, the wild barbarian heathens that are there on the frontier that are going to meet you as you move towards the promised land of California. Remember, California is a part of the nation because we invaded it. Think of Russia invading Ukraine. We invaded California. The Episcopal Church was founded by invaders, not settlers, not pioneers. As romantic as those titles were, we invaded the land. But because the Yankees were so brainwashed into thinking that this land was empty, that when they arrived here, they paid no attention to who were the original people that had been here for 10,000 years. They just saw empty land. They came for greed, remember, gold and farmland, not some idealistic utopia that they were trying to set up. And so it is no wonder that the history of the Episcopal Church has no record of a relationship with the Native people because they didn't exist. And in fact, by the time of the Yankee era, starting in 1846, and especially with the founding of California in 1850, those Native people that were here were targeted for annihilation. The first governor of California, Peter Burnett, who ran a mercantile down in San Jose on 5th Street, he declared in his inaugural speech as governor that he declared war of annihilation against all the tribes. He needed to clear California in order to have, quote, the settlers and pioneers come in and take the land. So what we have had to do as a task force, and the next slide, is begin to bring forward the resources that tell the history of the land. And what we are doing now, through the help of a really talented web designer, is creating an interactive DVD or interactive website that you will eventually be able to go on and click on a series of maps depicting the different eras. And every time you get to a new map, there will be new sites to look at. The first site will be all of the 9 tribes that are in our diocese. It's very important that we make space for the tribes to tell their own story. And I'm sorry that the chairwoman of the Tamian isn't here because it would be very important to hear the story from her. I'm not going to tell it. But you can go to the website and you can click on the Tamian and you will go and hear where they are and what are the current events. Then what we do is have a map of Spanish California, where is the founding of the missions. As romantic as many of us who grew up in California and remember our 4th grade assignment to build one of the California missions and to hear of the noble work of Father Bonifacio, we're going to go through, and there are 9 missions in El Camino Real. In fact, the reason We are called El Camino Real, as your former rector, John Benz, and I, and Stan Fowler, who was rector in Morgan Hill, we were sitting in John's house one day, and we were a part of the design group of the diocese, and we said, you know, we haven't identified the diocese yet. We haven't given a name. We can't call it the Diocese of San Jose because that's too limited, plus there's a Roman Catholic diocese. Can't call it Monterey because there's a Roman Catholic diocese. But we have all these missions. We'll call it El Camino Real. That's why we are called what we are. Again, we were caught in the romantic image of Spanish California. We do not realize that the missions were really concentration camps. Most of the native people did not come there gladly, let alone if they got there, they couldn't leave. Life expectancy of a child born in any of the missions was 2 years of age. Life expectancy of life of a child born in the villages was 28 years. They were terrible, terrible prisons. And the missions needed their labor to develop the mission lands. The Franciscans continued to spin out of control, and the Mexican government finally, in 1832, abolished the mission system and took all the lands from the Franciscans. They then divided the lands into it gave the lands to members of the military, especially the officers who had served well. So all the ranchos, the land grants in our diocese, were a part of that redistribution of land. The native tribes were given ranchos, but because ownership of land was beyond their comprehension, you didn't own land, the land owned you. You were a part of that. The land was our mother. How can you own her? And so very quickly, the Mexicans, taking an opportunity of this lack of sense of ownership, began to gobble up even the tribal lands, so that by the time, probably by 1832, almost no lands were owned by any of the tribes. All of the 9 tribes that in our diocese have no federal recognition, because what happened in the Yankee period, if they weren't killed by the direction of Governor Burnett, treaties were signed. But because the state senators did not want to have tribes have the land because it was valuable and it needed to be available to new settlers, they had the U.S. Senate shelve all of the treaties with the tribes in California. They remained hidden until 1906. Only now 27 of the nearly 100 tribes and treaties that had been signed in that period have been recognized for federal recognition. Our 9 tribes have no federal recognition, and they are all trying to gain that. So this interactive DVD that you will have available to you probably at the end of the summer will go through and have a map of all of the original 7 parishes in our diocese that were founded in the 1800s. Each one you'll click on and you'll go to their website, parish website, and their history page. And they are working as local research groups for our task force to bring forth as honest a presentation of what was happening in their communities during this period. From 1850 until 1872, there were 5 waves of genocide. Almost all the tribes were wiped out. Again, no record in the Episcopal Church. Even in 1871, the sheriff of Watsonville, which is where All Saints is, told all the Indian people, you have until tomorrow morning to get out of town. If you don't, I will start hanging you. What we are doing in our task force is to try and open up our history and then to say what is our relationship now with any of these tribes. And there are relationships that are there. It's interesting, Aunt Lisa's talking about the youth going back to South Dakota. She's going to the Cheyenne River Reservation where in 1968, St. Andrew's Saratoga began to bring young people there to go to school here for at least a semester or a term, because 1 in 3 of the youth were committing suicide. And the priests there felt if they could get out, then they could have a chance to see that they would be able to engage the larger world. St. Philip's, now Holy Family, has a continuing ministry with the Indian Health Center that started in 1988. And there will be more news about some of the exciting developments that are happening there. So that is the work of the task force, and I know I've gone over time, but it gives you an idea of what we're doing in the diocese and the resources that will be available to you. So.
Thanks so much. Now we'll move on. Oh, yeah. To Sherwin to hear a little bit about the origin of this project and what's happening on the De Anza side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Annalise. Thanks, Jerry. Let's see, so last winter quarter, a tribal leader from near Watsonville, so Chairman Valentin Lopez of the Amamutsan Band, he spoke at an event, at a virtual event at De Anza, and he, for the first time I had ever heard, he said that there was kind of a problem with us being named De Anza because that's actually naming the college after a Spanish colonizer. Oh, and so there was it was a Zoom event, and then there was kind of a flurry of things on chat saying, yeah, that's right. You know, why didn't we think of this before? Oh, and so there were several people who came together to, I guess, like work on this to try to figure out, you know, like what is it really a big problem that we're named after, that we're named De Anza? Oh, and so something that happened, like my part of this last summer, I spent like last summer just doing a lot of reading, you know, and so I went, for instance, to the California History Center, and I spent several afternoons like there with the staff. So like Lisa Christensen, for instance, maybe some of you know her. She's been very much involved in, I guess, like community history in this area. Oh, and so I spent several afternoons like there, and she pointed out like different things that I could look at. And like one of the things that she, the question that I asked, you know, like what's the relationship of our campus to the indigenous peoples who were living here? Oh, and so, I mean, like now the campus, it's, you know, I guess now it's kind of like private property, but then that wasn't what the campus was before when the indigenous peoples were here. Oh, and so some of what Lisa pointed out to me is available here on the website. Like one thing that I was really fascinated by was like the importance of oak trees. So I think that's an oak tree in the back here. Oh, and so I mean, I was never really aware of like the oak trees in this area, but then the oak trees, in fact, were the source of one of the staple foods for the indigenous peoples who were living here. So the acorns could be processed and made into bread. Oh, and so I guess like in the course of doing this research, like it's been, I guess, like kind of personally rewarding for me because like features of the land. For instance, like the prevalence of oak trees, I guess like the kind of like chaparral vegetation that's like on the hills that's surrounding us. Like that kind of thing, it became, I don't know, it became kind of more significant to me. Like these things that are still here, they're kind of the traces of the land that was sustaining the people who were living here before people from Europe, before people like Asia, from myself, like came to this area. And so one of the things that we've developed since last year, we've in conjunction with the California History Center. So this is actually located on the California History Center's website. We've put together this website that has like a section that's like on the land. And so I guess like the first thing, like the historical vegetation and drainage patterns. So this area, from what I can gather, from what I've been able to find, but I'm not, by no means is this conclusive. Like this area wasn't so economically important, so to speak, for the tribes in this area, because this area was it was like kind of chaparral vegetation. And so I'm not so sure like how this kind of area would have worked into, I guess, like the lives of the local tribes. Like other areas might have been where like they were fishing, for instance. And so like Stevens Creek, like it wasn't called Stevens Creek before, but then what we know of is like Stevens Creek now, it wasn't just like kind of a straight line, like it didn't have this like set course. Like this whole area, like I guess like the course of like the flow of water, like would change like periodically. It wasn't so fixed before. And so I guess like, yeah, I mean I personally found this like really fascinating, how like this land, it's like, I guess like trying to develop this kind of relationship with indigenous peoples, like it's made the land like kind of speak to me, so to speak. Like the land is like different aspects of the land are becoming more significant. But then, like I was really hoping that like our guests would be here, because like I kind of suspect that I'm projecting a lot, like onto the land. And so I guess like there are like important geographic and cultural sites, a section here, but then this is very lacking, because these are important geographic and cultural sites, I guess like from I guess like the perspective of like current California residents. But then like are these the sites that were important for the indigenous peoples? Like we would have to ask them, I think. And then the next section is like the current tribal groups that are still like kind of like associated with the area. So there's the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and the Tamian Nation, and then the Ramaytush. They're like the Foothill De Anza district. It kind of straddles like the boundary line between the Tamian, the Tamian and the Ramaytush, and then the Amamutsan band that's like south of here, like Santa Cruz, Watsonville, like that area. And so one of the things that I've heard from like many indigenous groups, and in particular like these groups, is that there's this misconception that they're extinct. But then that's completely not the case. Like there's still this fight for instance, federal recognition by the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. And so, yeah, like we felt it was important to have these links here, just to indicate that like even though there's been genocide, even though there's been like many people have been killed, the indigenous peoples, like they're resilient, and they continue, and they still have they're still asking to be heard. And then finally, the last part is specific to, I guess, like this effort to change the name of the college. And like we recognize now that this isn't something that's going to happen like overnight. Like this is going to be, like it's going to take a long time, like to, like on the one hand, like educate the community, and but then on the other hand, there's on the other hand, there are, I guess, like things that like the board of trustees, which is ultimately going to be able to decide what the name of the college is. There are things that they're like handling now that aren't, that's going to make it hard for us to be heard by them at this particular moment. But then this website, I personally think that this is a big advance, because I wish that like when our group like started this project, there was already this sort of like groundwork that had been laid for us. And so even though the name's not going to change, like it's not going to change this year, it's not going to change next year, most likely, when there are people who are concerned about the name of the college and what the name represents, like there will be these resources that are available to them, so they don't have to start from zero. Okay, and then can you switch to the other website? Oh, and so what's happened at the college this year? Like in addition to like these efforts to like change the name of the college, simultaneously there are efforts at the college to support Indigenous peoples. Oh, and so one of the most significant events that happened like on the campus just a couple of months ago. There were speakers who were raising awareness about this problem of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, or murdered and missing Indigenous people. And so even now, like even in the present, there's a way in which the lives of Native Americans aren't being valued in the same way like other people's lives are being valued. And so a very alarming number of like young Native American women, young Native American girls are disappearing or are being found murdered. And there's been very little redress for this, like very little, like I guess, like protection. And so this movement is growing up. It's a little bit like Black Lives Matter. It's basically because the powers that be, like aren't providing security, like for Indigenous people. Like they're having to raise their voices and say that, and say that, like their safety is important as well. And so that I just wanted to point this out, just to show that, like it's not just about like changing the name of the college. Like I think the motivation also for our group, the Name Exploration Group, is to support the well-being like of the Indigenous peoples and to help them to flourish as well. Okay, so I guess we're out of time. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Sherwin. I know it's already 1 o'clock, but if anybody has questions for either of our speakers, I'm happy to take a couple of questions before we wrap up here. I know a question that I have is if you could share a little bit about some of the ideas for what the name would be changed to if it were changed. Do you have any information about that? Is it on there? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll check. Is it on this one?
Yeah, it's that one. So if you click on that link on the website, and then there's a very nice like history and background. But if you scroll all the way to the end, so the two names recommended by the Muwekma Ohlone tribe One is Tamiyan College, which would be naming the campus after the indigenous peoples who were living in this area. So the Tamiyan extended from pretty much like here, like from Stevens Creek, like to, yeah, like I guess like their main center was like the Guadalupe River, like kind of through like San Jose, Santa Clara. And then the other one, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Pertuxi College. Yeah, and so that's I guess one thing that I wasn't aware of that's actually in this document. The Muwekma researchers, they found evidence of like the specific people who were living kind of in this area, like the Stevens Creek area.
Which is like a subgroup of the Tamiyan?
I'm thinking that's the case. Okay. Yeah.
Sure. Any other questions for either of them? Yeah. What is this website? That's a very good question. Yeah, so the main page is deanza.edu/CALIF history. Yeah, but it's not the whole word California. It's just CALIF history.
The Anza College website, and then just search on the website for California History Center. You'll get this page, and then the part of the site that's, oops.
Oh yeah, it's on the side here, right?
Yeah, the part of the site that's about, that has all the stuff about the name, like it's under history of the land and its original peoples.
Yep. Yeah, so you just go to the De Anza College, search California history, and then click on the history of the land and its original peoples. And there's really, I would commend to you everything on this page, but if you want to watch the videos of the event we had back in October at De Anza, it's on here. Yeah, there's 4 YouTube videos from that event that show a couple of the speakers that were supposed to be here today, and then a couple others as well.
Not a question, just a comment. In the problem of disappearing women and girls in Native tribes was on 60 Minutes several years ago, I think pre-COVID. And so I'm sorry that it's now rearing its head a little more instead of back then. And most of the story on 60 Minutes was in California.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more out there about that now. Any other questions? Well, I want to say thank you to both of you guys for being here today. Sorry that I didn't quite go as planned. And I'll keep everybody at St. Jude's posted. I think, are you guys hoping to have another event at some point at De Anza? Perhaps. Yeah, about the name change. Something that's encouraging is there are a lot of students behind this effort right now. Some of them were invited to come today. I suspect they didn't come because it's their finals week, so you can keep them all in your prayers. But they've been tabling on campus, gathering signatures from the student body, from professors, and lots of things like that. So the students care, the professors care. It will take a long time, but we're excited for what you guys are doing. Thanks.
One of the outcomes of our task force has been to form a new nonprofit called Indigenous Native Diversity Network. And it's centered in Hollister. And Hollister has had a tradition of powwows and Indian gatherings. And this group is sponsoring the second Indian gathering in Hollister. Which will be September, I think it's September 11th and 12th, anyway, the second weekend. And it is open to the public, and it's an opportunity to see dancing, to hear storytelling, to meet with members of the tribes that are in our diocese, but way beyond that, because it's an open invitation for the tribes to gather. So more information will be available in the diocesan newsletter, but if you want to gather and see that Native people are very much with us and here, you're welcome to join us.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, I think that's all we've got for today, but thank you all for being here, and this will be posted if you want to share it to other people at St. Jude's or beyond, also on YouTube.